and digital arts, pursuing a career in creating museum displays with a dream to work for the St. Augustine Pirate and Treasure Museum. Take it away.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you. And welcome to my fantabulous senior project, Fact or Fiction. This project is an interactive ink-based information kiosk which helped educate users on the truth behind popular pirate tropes. I was responsible for creating the video segments, designing the interactive elements of the kiosk, making the code, and doing the research for the information. The kiosk itself was of my design and was built through the help of Dean's funding by Sean Irwin. As I've done a lot of work in interactive art and history since they're my two majors, it made sense for me to combine this senior project with my senior research. For my history senior capstone, I wrote Piracy is Not a Victimless Crime, How Media Tropes Changed Pirates from Criminals to Role Models, which you can all come and see at 225 at Elizabeth 315, which was an intensive research study into the fact and fiction of pirates in media as compared to pirates in real life and why the discrepancy between the two exists. It seemed only right to emphasize this research in a way that more people could interact with. Therefore, I elected to do my history research in tandem with my digital arts project. In the past, I have created other interactive games and challenges, including my potion riddle game from my first semester senior project, which had users solve riddles to discover the 2 correct cups and scan them in to play videos based on whether or not they had been right or wrong about the correct cup. But this work is really mostly inspired by the interactive displays at the St. Augustine Pirate and Treasure Museum. Those are more information kiosks, however, and have a less entertaining interaction element to them than my more game-like kiosk, but it's still a primary source of influence for me, given their combination of pirate history and interactivity. Moving on to the project itself, the kiosk had a couple of different elements that made it unique, particularly from the exhibits at the Treasure and Pirate Museum. The general concept of the project is as follows. A user reads or hears a question that is posed on the screen related to pirates. The question prompts them to choose one of 6 silhouettes they believe is the answer: the hook, the peg leg, the treasure chest, the parrot, or the Jolly Roger, or the plank. If they select incorrectly, they are prompted to try again, but if they guess correctly or know the answer, then an answer will play on the screen that will show an infographic congratulating them and offering information about the subject of piracy to go along with the silhouette. That's a little bit much, but we're going to get into that. The project required a solid list of equipment given the multiple mediums it crossed over into. For the interactive elements of the project, I used interactive ink, referred to as conductive paint, and a touchboard which connected the pictures on the kiosk to the code created in MaxPatch software. Within the kiosk, the touchboard and the computer were hidden and a screen inserted in place for viewing purposes. For starters, though, I utilized Adobe Premiere Pro and Photoshop to create the videos, images, and audio as seen in the final product. The design of these changed the most over time and were actually the hardest part of the project. The original concept for the kiosk was just an infographic, as you can see on the left, but it was very text-heavy, it was very information-heavy, and it was deemed essentially too boring for this kind of interactive game project. So it was changed to be more game-like. To start with, in the concept of the game, it was meant to be a true or false option, where users only interacted with true or false buttons. But as I did further research in my senior research, I realized that there's very little true or false in the realm of piracy. Things I believed to be cut and dry suddenly became far more complicated. In the end, I realized focusing questions on the objects of piracy was able to convey my research far better and gave me the option to elaborate more on what the answers to these questions meant and how they reflected piracy in media. So, for example, this will be an example of a prompt and how the interaction occurred.
Popular cinematic mode of execution, rarely used by actual pirates.
In the meantime, you would select one of these options, and supposing you selected the plank.
Correct! Fun fact, walking the plank was a rarely used method of execution by both pirates and sailors, only being used a handful of times in all of history.
As you see, that's a lot of information, but it works. It works a lot better than a true or false statement would, because a simple true or false pirates did or didn't make people walk the plank just doesn't accurately convey what my research uncovered, and it would be silly to phrase a question like, true or false, pirates rarely made people walk the plank, or the like, because the question already gives away the answer to an extent. In light of that, the game was changed to include a selection of objects, which you saw before, reflecting different concepts of pirate artifacts, and worked much better to really showcase the work I had done, digging deep into pirates and their media counterparts.
Actual pirates
I'm sure you all enjoyed it. But... Surely the how of a project is fascinating, but far more interesting in my experience is the why. I knew when I did my senior history capstone researching and comparing pirates in history to their counterparts in media that I wanted to create an experience where my research could be interacted with by the public. A history paper is only interacted with really by other historians when the purpose of research is to share newfound knowledge with everyone. So I set about to create a project which would accomplish just that, taking inspiration from the techniques museums are adopting to create a more enjoyable and educational experience for all. The kiosk is a culmination of understanding what worked and what didn't work for museums while keeping the project within the scope of my own abilities. Each element of the project was specifically designed to create an immersive and exciting experience that makes history come alive. The result of that effort is fact or fiction. And you can see here as it was displayed on exhibit in the Hand Art Center in this very building. And kind of an example of how you would interact with it. It's sort of hard with this project to describe how you use it in a simple video, because a real important element of it is your own personal interaction with it and how you experience it. But this is a general concept. I'm very proud of that work, and thank you so much for listening to me.
Great, questions?
Could you tell us again what software applications you used? I didn't quite get.
Yes, so I used General Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Premiere Pro, and then MaxPatch for the code.
Thank you.
Yeah, how much experience have you had using a microprocessor for the little computer that tied in together with the electronic sensors and the paint and so forth?
I've done a lot of work in interactive art. That's my focus, is interactivity in art. So I have taken, as of now, including all my senior project classes, 4 classes dedicated to interactivity, and it was mostly my focus. There are other versions of routes you can go with interactivity, where a lot of people focus more on animation. I focus specifically on the interactive objects. So I've used interactive ink, I've used buttons, I've used switches. I really like the ability to, I don't know, feel like you're part of it.
Gotcha. No, it's fascinating how you have the interactive ink and so far. I've never heard of such a thing before.
Oh.
I'm totally impressed by it. Now, how does it work? Do you press? So does it
So as you can see here, she's kind of demonstrating what you would do. So a question is posed on the screen, and you would just touch it. That is all you need to do. There's no button on it. The whole silhouette is interactive. So you could press anywhere on the silhouette, and it would register that as
What
an answer.
does that do? Create a short circuit or something?
So what it does is there's wiring that's connected. There's a small wire connected to one part of the paint. So when you touch it, your hand finishes the connection.
Right.
So that wire goes all the way down to the touchboard. The touchboard with my code in it registers what's happening. It goes into the computer where MaxPatch has the rest of the code,
Cool.
and it finishes that connection so it plays the correct corresponding video.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about how you picked those particular 6 options?
Yes.
And can you also talk a bit about how the history part of this project helped you and how it hindered you?
Okay, so for these, I originally had different concepts for it. There's supposed to be a section dedicated to sword fighting, or the concept of flinning, which is prevalent in movies or film versions of piracy and sword fighting. But I eventually decided that certain questions just didn't work for that kind of concept. It just wasn't working that you could say, like, people did this, because it was getting, first of all, too complicated.
Right.
Because they were very niche questions that people definitely wouldn't know the answer to. So I picked things that people were more likely to know, images people were familiar with, blocking the plank, a hook, a treasure chest, a parrot, things people would immediately recognize on the screen. We can tell with that is a peg leg. We can see that. We can see a parrot, and we recognize that reflects a parrot. The only one I had trouble with was the Jolly Roger, but people tended to figure that one out pretty fast. And in terms of the history was awesome because I love history. So I first came up with my history project before I came up with this one. So while I was doing the history research, it was interesting to see how things were different and to plan a game around that, but it was also a problem because I know so much about it. All of a sudden I became an expert in something, and I had to shrink it down to something the general public would not only understand without getting too technical, but also enjoy and have fun with.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a problem to figure out, what do I include and what do I exclude, and how do I make it something everyone will like, including myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
So 2 constraints on a project like this are time and budget. So could you talk about how those impacted your ultimate outcomes, time and budget?
So time, I had the whole year to do it, which I think was great. My history senior project only took half the year, but this one we had 2 classes for it, and that was excellent because over time I realized there are so many working elements to this. I had to do videos, audio, graphics, coding, building the kiosk. It took a lot of time, effort, and energy. So being able to have that whole year to do it was absolutely necessary because this wasn't something I could just put together a month before. And then cost, most of it was managed to be items I could borrow from the touchboard, the computer, the screen. Those are things I could borrow, the interactive ink, but the kiosk itself, I had to get Dean's funding for. That was about a $250 commitment, so I could hire Sean to create the kiosk, and that also took time. I had to wait for that. So it wasn't an inexpensive project necessarily. If I had to get everything myself, this would have been a very expensive project and outside of the realm of my possibilities, but luckily Stetson has such a good interactivity program that I was able to have access to these resources from the start.
What language does MathPatch use, and is it node-based or more traditional?
So MathPatch is kind of like its own software thing. I don't really know how to describe it. It's not like it follows the typical process of like JavaScript or anything like that. MathPatch is kind of like, I don't know how to say, one of like the pseudo softwares where you don't need to code absolutely everything. There are pre-made things, kind of like, I don't know if anyone did like work with code, like when they were in high school. It's similar to that. I don't really know if I would compare it to any other languages or the way that they're operated, because it's like a screen you get and you just plug things in for the most part.
Okay.
It's like its own thing because it's meant specifically to be done for projects like this. It's not meant to like design websites or to create like video games so much as it is to...
So it's like specific to interactivity?
Sort of. I would say it's close to specific to interactivity. It's not wholly dedicated. You can do other things with it, but it's more dedicated to people who are trying to create projects or create similar to this, not necessarily interactivity, but the way the screen works, the way the coding jumps through videos. It's not meant to be like other softwares or coding softwares. I don't know how to describe it without like pulling it up and like showing it.
What are your plans going forward? Are you interested in doing another kiosk of a different avenue, or are you planning on making this bigger?
So the main goal for me for like my whole life has been to create interactive kiosks. That's kind of why I went to history and digital arts major, because I thought that was a really fun combination where I had something I could do with that. So the goal would be in the future to create probably more expensive versions of this. This is for all the money and time it costs. It is a very basic outline of it. Hopefully in the future, yes, I will create more interesting, more elaborate projects and hopefully be funded by a museum to do that. But yes, this is something I would like to do further going forward.
Excellent. Any more questions? Fabulous. Thank you so much.